I'm Dwayne Rollheiser with Todayville. Is the pandemic over? A lot of people are probably under the impression it is over, but if you pay attention to things like the Alberta Conservative leadership race or the federal Conservative leadership race, you'll see that the pandemic is far from over as far as our politicians are concerned. And I wanted to introduce you to someone who you may already well know, but you may have not heard from him in a while. And for Chris Scott of the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta, the pandemic is only just beginning. Chris, I'd like to bring you in now and ask you, where are you at in terms of what is happening in your life due to this pandemic that was thrust upon us or we stumbled into here 2 years ago?
Hey, Dwayne. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know how to answer that. I'm just doing my thing. I have a business to run, so I have the cafe, which is fairly busy, and I'm also doing a lot of advocacy work for certain groups out there. The Alberta Prosperity Project being one of them. And life is going on, but in the background, there's a lot of things. Basically, the same things that allowed what happened to us over the last 2.5 years. The things that allowed that are still there. Like, nothing has really changed. We have politicians changing their tones. We're allowed to go and enter a restaurant without showing our papers, but really nothing has changed.
Well, let's back up and ask when this started so long ago now. Your life must have been entirely different. Can you just back up and tell us what it was like for Chris Scott at the Whistle Stop, in this early or late winter of 2020?
In the late winter of 2020. So that was before the restrictions.
Yes.
I don't know. I was a fairly quiet person. And I still don't really like big crowds. I didn't really meet many new people. I just kept to myself and tried to make a go of it in my restaurant and convenience store out in Mirror.
How was it going?
It was going okay. It was my first foray into the hospitality industry, and not only just the hospitality industry, but we also have the gas station and a convenience store and RV park there. So. Yeah, it was challenging and we struggled. It's a very steep learning curve, but we were doing well. We made some changes that the community was really receptive to, and we increased our clientele. So yeah, things were all right.
So you're a small business operator, formerly in oil and gas, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So you're learning on the fly. You've got a small business, and you're trying to make a go of it. And making some headway, and then COVID hits. And what happened? What were your thoughts? I suppose, like everyone else, you must have initially been quite frightened of COVID, and really hesitant to not listen to authorities at that point. Or were you initially feeling exactly how you do now?
Well, I've never been hesitant to not listen to authorities. But I was probably in the same boat that 90% of people were. I mean, we were hearing things on the news that were downright frightening. We were seeing videos coming out of places like China where it appeared that people were dropping dead in the streets. So yeah, I mean, for the first little while, of course, we were worried. I've got a lot of elderly loved ones in my family, and I was concerned about them. And actually, I frequently made comments about how we needed to, pay attention to what we're doing and where we're going, because this virus that was causing people to drop dead could be on our doorstep. So it's not like I was, I didn't believe something was going on. I was pretty worried, just like everyone else.
Then what happened? What shook your opinions and made you start to think a little bit different from a lot of the people who are in charge?
I just watched what was going on. I paid attention to what was going on around me. I looked at the numbers. I looked at the statistics and the data. In the beginning, we didn't have any data to go on. It was all new. And, within 6 months, we kind of had a better understanding of what was going on. We could look at historical mortality rates or morbidity rates, that kind of thing. And within that first 6 months to a year, we actually had some real world data and knowledge. And when I say we, I mean everybody from us lowly peons that just watch the news and watch the releases on social media and stuff, right up to the people, our legislators. Like we all saw the same things, we hear the same things. And what really did it for me was, I struggled through the first set of restrictions, grumbled about it, but we did it. We wore our masks. We used hand sanitizer so much that we probably had a blood alcohol level of 0.05. We did all those things. We spent money on upgrades and things like that. But when Jason Kenney, and this would have been December 2021, I believe, he actually apologized to small business, and he said, "We're sorry for deciding who kind of lives and dies in business, and you're all essential, and we're not going to do this to you again." And then he completely flip-flopped and locked down again. And I was pissed because we knew that restaurants in particular they weren't super spreaders. I mean, at that point, they said restaurants were responsible for between 1% and 3% of all transmission, which is a pretty low number. Yet they locked us down again anyway. And I grumbled about it. And then, during that time, I said, you know what, if they continue this or if they do this again, I'm not complying, because my business is going to go under. And the date came when they were supposed to reopen us, and the date went and we were still locked down. Everybody was. And I was very, very close to just throwing my doors open, but I didn't. I thought, you know what, I'll just wait one more week. I'll be compliant. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want this battle. So another week went by, and then Dina Hinshaw, she took to social media and she told us that there was no foreseeable end in sight to the restrictions. And for me, that's not an educated, responsible statement. If they don't have any idea what's going on, in so much as that they can't even tell you when we're going to be able to open, how does that fit with 2 weeks to flatten the curve? They obviously didn't have a plan, didn't know what they were doing, and that was it for me. As soon as I heard there was no end in sight, I talked to my staff, I talked to my family, I had everybody's support, and we opened the doors.
And then all hell broke loose, right? So can you walk us through some of the things that started to happen in those first days in terms of the authorities cracking down on you?
The biggest,
sorry.
That's okay. The biggest and most significant thing is we sold a lot more hamburgers.
Well, let's talk about that. You say that's a big and significant thing. Of course it is. You're in business. You must have faced a lot of opposition from, of course, not only the authorities, but from people that are extremely concerned about COVID. People may have lost loved ones or concerned they would have lost loved ones. And you must have been called some very nasty names over the last year and a half, 2 years, 2.5 years. What do you say to people when if you respond to people who say things like, well, you've increased your business and now you're on your way to becoming wealthy because of this?
Well, let's back up a minute. So when I said we sold a lot more hamburgers, the point there is not that we were making a whole bunch of money, but that people were driving from all over the province and the country, for that matter, to support what we were doing. Like, the support was tremendous. Oftentimes we had lineups outside our door that were over 2 hours long. And it's not because, well, maybe a little bit because we're the only restaurant open in Alberta, but people don't drive 4 or 5 or 8 hours for that. They drive that far because they want to be part of something. They want to stand up alongside people who are standing up for themselves. So that was what that's all about. Now, as for the becoming wealthy part of it, the restaurant industry on a good day is not like, you don't get rich. You make a living. Hopefully you can pay your bills. Only 30% of restaurants make it through their first 3 years. So if you can make a go of it at all, that's good. Now, when you're a little restaurant like mine and you go from, let's say 60 meals a day to 600, that's a logistical nightmare. And it costs a ton of money, especially if you're new to the industry. Your waste is higher, labor is much higher. So yeah, we were busier, but I had a lot of staff. And for that matter, I actually kept all my staff on throughout the restrictions. I did my best to pivot and I took advantage of whatever subsidies we could, but I kept people employed, even when it meant that I didn't take a paycheck. So, we went into this in a very, very like a cash critical position. And it wasn't selling hamburgers that got us through it. It was people coming in and being like, here's $50. You're going to need this for legal fees. You're going to need this to keep going. But it's certainly there are those out there who believe that I did this just to make money. And I find it's almost, the notion is it's ridiculous to me. I can understand why they might think that, but if you look at the big picture and you consider that the last job that I had before I had a restaurant, I made over 10 times as much money as I did in the hospitality industry. I've got over 20 years of oil field experience. If I wanted to be wealthy, that Whistle-Stop would have a chain on the door, the property would be for sale, and I would be out there in the oil patch making way, way more money. But I don't. And I didn't even do that when, the restrictions threatened to end the business. I kept it going. I kept people employed. I made way less money. I put myself in a very, very precarious financial situation. I mean, I'm still not out of that. So what I've done is exactly the opposite of try and become wealthy. I've stood on principle, and that principle is I'm not going to let the government or anybody else tell me that I can't do something or force me to fail. It's not going to happen. And a big part of that is those thousands and likely tens of thousands of people now who have come through my door to shake my hand and thank me for what I did because, nobody else was doing it. 80% of my business is still people like that. I mean, I've taken more pictures with people over the last 2.5 years than probably Jason Kenney has. And there's a reason for that. People recognize the fact that I did something that I put myself at risk. And if it was just about me, I would no longer be taking that risk. I would be out of it and probably making piles and piles of money like I did before. And I wouldn't have any of the stress that I do. Like it's completely backwards what people think that this was to make me wealthy. It had nothing to do with that. It was in my mind then and now, it was the right thing to do. And it was something I had to do because if nobody stands up and takes a stand against what's going on, if I didn't do it, then who's going to do it? If not me, then who? So that's kind of in a nutshell, my answer to the becoming wealthy statement.
Well, it has certainly made you one of the most famous people who make hamburgers in this part of the world. And you're not denying that it may have helped your business somewhat, although that's relative to what you would have made and were making earlier in your life. And you took a massive risk. There's no doubt about it. In fact, you spent time in jail. I'd like to get to that. Could you talk a little bit about all the downside that has happened? I know you've been vilified by many as taken pictures of you. Other people are just as busy vilifying you. And you've been, you've went in a small town. We all know our local police officers, and you got to experience something you'd never want to go through or put someone else through, I guess, with a friend who would be a police officer. Can you tell me about some of the negative things that have happened or probably continue to happen?
So that brings up a good point. After all of this occurred and I went to jail and I had to sign an undertaking saying that I would follow the Public Health Act, which, by the way, is my only regret. If I could do anything over again, I wouldn't have signed that undertaking. I signed that undertaking in order to basically make bail and get out of jail. Now, this was at the advice of my lawyers and my friends and my family. Everybody told me I was better on the outside, but in my mind, I actually set aside my principles and did something to get myself out of jail. I wish I never did, but anyway, the past is the past. So after I did that,
sorry, what did that say?
It said that I had to comply with the Public Health Act and listen to AHS. So after that, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but at one point the government actually told us that we had to show our papers to go eat in a restaurant. Did you know that, Dwayne?
Showing your vaccine status, you mean?
Yeah, you actually had to go, if you wanted to eat in a restaurant or go to a gym or go to a pool, you had to go and do something to yourself that you may or may not have wanted to do to your body. You had to set aside your own autonomy over your body, do something that the government told you you had to do in order to participate fully in society. That actually happened in Alberta, in Canada. I don't know if anybody remembers, because everyone's out golfing and camping right now. But when that came around, I had a decision to make. I could have said, because remember, I have a restaurant and I would have had to ask people for their papers. I could have said, well, you know what, everybody, this is what's best for my business. And I just have to ask you for my papers because we gotta make it and we got to do business. And this is the only way to do it. I didn't. I said, screw that noise. I am not asking people for their papers. I am not going to discriminate against anybody based on the choices they make with their own body. And because I had to follow what the government was saying, according to my bail conditions, I had to keep my dining room closed. And I kept my dining room closed for the entire time that Vax passport was in place. So, if people want to talk about things I did that they consider selfish, they have to ask themselves, if I really did this for me, wouldn't I have justified following the rules and asking people for their papers in my own mind or in their minds? I didn't do that. I stood on my principles and I allowed my business and my financial position to be put at risk because I wouldn't comply. And I would do it again and again and again, as many times as it takes or as many times as I could.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying maybe the only thing you would change about those days would be that you would have spent more time in jail.
That's probably how it would have played out, because if I hadn't signed the undertaking, then, they would have set another date and there would have been more hearings and just decide what they're going to do with me. And I would have sat in jail while they did that, which sucked because I didn't get a shower until half hour before I went to see the judge. I had my contacts in, my dailies in for 3 days, no toothbrush, no change of clothes. It sucked.
Wow. So, and I suppose that would have potentially had devastating effects on your business as well if you weren't able to, if you had spent more time away from it.
No, I don't know that it would have made much of a difference. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to get out there and start doing any advocacy work. But at that point, my business, AHS, had actually seized my property and put a chain and lock on my door. So I couldn't even operate my business. I got out of jail and it was another 5 weeks before I opened my restaurant back up.
Now, in those 5 weeks, you maybe have changed slightly from a restaurant owner into a restaurant owner / political activist of some type. What happened in those 5 weeks when your restaurant was chained up that continues today?
Well, we spent a lot of time around the campfire just enjoying some, just some, I get, what do you call it, fellowship or community time kind of thing. But it gave me a lot of time to think. It gave me a lot of time to kind of think about solutions and where the solution was at, if there was a solution. And walking past my business every day and seeing that chain on the door, that really motivated me and strengthened my resolve to, tear down the structure that allowed this type of thing to happen to us in this province and in this country. And it's not just me and businesses that were affected. Even those who hate me and vilify me and make these really awesome, hilarious, but degrading memes about me, it's affected them too. Because 2.5, 3 years ago, they may not have been that person. But after 2 years of the government telling you or telling them that everything going on in the world is one class of people's fault and that we needed to blame them, and if they would only comply, everybody would get out of this. After that changed them into people that they probably would be ashamed of if they looked, if they put themselves in their shoes 3 years ago. So this has affected everybody, regardless of their position on the pandemic or the vaccine or the restrictions or any of that.
And you're not letting it go. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing politically? For instance, I know you're on the way to a meeting right now.
Yeah, so no, I can't let this go. It's a matter of survival. whether people believe that or not. We have groups that really would see us owning nothing and being happy. And this is the message. We've heard this messaging for a few years now. We've heard the term build back better. And if you think about it, the better part sounds great. But when you talk about building back, well, there's a precursor to building back, and that's destruction. There are those out there who hate our way of life. They want to destroy our way of life, and they want us all to be, subservient and compliant to a government. And that's not how it's supposed to be. The government is supposed to be subservient to us. They are supposed to serve us. They're our servants, literally. And everything they do is supposed to be on our behalf to our benefit. Now, we have governments right now telling farmers that they have to stop using nitrogen-based fertilizer because climate change. We have governments telling us that we need to pay through the nose for the very energy that has increased our quality of life and saved millions and millions and millions of people across the globe. We have governments telling us that, look what's going on in the Netherlands. They're telling them that they have to give up their land to the government because climate change, because sustainability. And this idea, this agenda, this model they're trying to apply in different places all over the world and has been applied, by the way. Sri Lanka and the Netherlands are two great examples. That is in Canada.
You are part of a political movement now. You've got you're raising funds for this movement. What is it, and where are you planning to go with this?
Alberta, because of our position within Confederation, because of the history we have with our relationship with the federal government here in Canada, Alberta is the perfect storm to stand up and say, enough is enough. We're not going down this path of own nothing and be happy. We are going to hold a referendum on independence and use that as leverage to get a better deal from the federal government. Because the problems that I faced, this isn't necessarily just an Alberta thing. This has gone from a save my business to a, oh my goodness, we've given up control over our own lives, and the federal government is literally pushing down our throats. Carbon tax, vilification of the energy industry, no more pipelines bill, internet censorship bill. What else have we got? Carbon tax, the fertilizer mandate, you name it. All of these things that are coming down are at the hands of the federal government. So the solution for me is transforming Alberta into a place where rights, freedoms, and prosperity are held in the highest regard. So your individual rights are recognized as not given to you by the government. They're recognized as something you're born with, and they can't be taken away except in the most extreme circumstances. So the United Conservative Party was not open to hearing any of the ideas about individual rights and freedoms. As a matter of fact, the MLAs mostly said the same scripted things that all the other ones did in support of the Premier and the restrictions and the Vax Pass and all these things. So if the political parties aren't going to save you, if your MLA and your politicians aren't going to save you, you do it yourself. So about a year and a bit ago, we had a meeting in a shop in Nisku, and there was representatives from all of the political parties. There was influencers, political leaders. There was a couple MLAs there, I believe. And we had a discussion about what we're going to do to create a parade, to create a movement that the politicians wanted to get in front of. And so was born the Alberta Prosperity Project. So the Alberta Prosperity Project is an educational society. It's actually the Alberta Prosperity Society that governs the Alberta Prosperity Project. And their mission statement is to educate Albertans as to the benefits and merits of an independent Alberta. One of the things that they talk about a lot is how Alberta really does need to negotiate a better deal with the federal government. I mean, we have underrepresentation. We have federal laws forced on us, like the carbon tax, that contradict the Constitution. And we need leverage to negotiate this stuff. And really, the only leverage we could ever have in this province is a successful referendum on independence. Jason Kenney actually kind of proved that when he tried to challenge the carbon tax in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, we lost that challenge as Albertans, even though it should have been a slam dunk constitutionally, because the Supreme Court said, yes, you have these rights as a province, but you don't because climate change. That's where that conversation ended. And we really have no hope of fixing any of those things unless we have some leverage. So that's where the solution for this stuff is. Now, you might actually be wondering, well, how does restrictions and vaccine mandates and all this have anything to do with Alberta seceding from Canada, or at the very least having a successful referendum? And it all comes back to that idea of standing up for yourself. We need to stand up for ourselves, and the politicians aren't going to do it, so then we do it on our own. And the Alberta Prosperity Project is building a membership and gaining momentum and building a monumental organization so that our politicians in this province, if they want to make government, they have to get in front of this parade that's being created. That's the idea, and it's working. I mean, you're seeing even Brian Jean is throwing the word freedom around like it's free. Danielle Smith is speaking out against the WEF. So is Todd Lowen, and it's working.
Even Travis Taze, who was in the COVID committee that decided on the restrictions, he's now apologized and has promised that he would not, as premier, do that again. Does that vindicate what you're doing?
No, not at all. They can say what they want, but until they start saying things like, we're going to review the legislation that allowed this and find out if it actually, if it's consistent with the Constitution, that would be big. Because they can say everything they can say anything they want, but if the mechanisms to do this to us are still in place, then they can do the same thing Jason Kenney did, flip-flop on their position, and lock us down again, or tell us we have to have papers to go to a restaurant.
I understand that movement is growing, but I would highly suspect that it's probably still well under 50% of Albertans that feel that so strongly about being an independent nation, seceding from one of the better countries in the world. What does that mean in terms of what the Alberta Prosperity Project needs to do?
Well, there's a lot of work to be done, and if the work is done, I know we'll be successful. When I speak at a room, actually, which I'm about to do in 50 minutes, so I should probably better hurry. But when I speak at a room of people, I generally ask them how many people in that room, have memberships, and how many people are on board with the idea of a referendum on independence. And in a room of 500 people, most of the time, a couple hundred, 250 will have memberships, and about the same will be on board with a referendum on independence. Once we're done speaking, I ask how many people in the room are going to leave without a membership, and there's hardly any hands. So that suggests to me that once people actually hear the real plan, the real hope for Alberta, they're very, very receptive to it. There's a very high rate of bringing people into the fold, because what we're offering is not a right wing or a left wing solution. It's not anything like that. It doesn't leave an NDP voter, at least an NDP voter who votes for the right reasons. I mean, better healthcare and education and social programs and those kind of things. Now, I'm not talking about people who vote because they want to see a socialist Marxist government, but the message, it's very resounding. Like it reaches people.
Let me ask you this now. It would seem to me thus far in the leadership race in Alberta here that probably Danielle Smith is the closest to being on side with the Alberta Prosperity Project. Do you think that organization would work with Danielle, or are you looking elsewhere politically?
So because the APP is an educational society, they have to be politically agnostic. They can't be advocating for one party or another. Their job is simply to educate Albertans as to the merits of independence. So when it comes to working with any particular politician, it's less working with them and more having discussions and engaging in dialogue to either show the people of Alberta that that particular person or politician is aligned with what the APP is advocating for, or they're not aligned. So it's a scary thing to stick your neck out and advocate for what the APP is advocating for if you're a politician. So that brings up another point. The whole idea here is to do something that gives these politicians the courage to do something that's never been done before. And if we have a organization with a membership of 150, 200, 500,000 people, and those people are saying, we want a referendum on independence, that is going to give those politicians who are kind of walking that fine line between sticking their necks out and following the polls, it's going to give them the courage to start acknowledging that we need that leverage.
Just to make this crystal clear, are you saying that the APP is definitely out to provide for an independent, to pave the way for an independent Alberta? Or are you saying that the APP can work within Canada in given circumstances?
Well, our provincial relationship with the federal government it's like a marriage, right? And right now, Alberta is in an abusive relationship. This marriage is very one-sided, and we need to fix it. But we don't have anything to use to do that. So I'm of the mind that we're less concerned with becoming an independent nation than we are with having the leverage to fix Alberta's position. And that's the way this works. When you have that referendum and you go to Ottawa and you say, listen, we had a referendum and either you fix what's going on with our relationship or we're out. Now the talks start. And it is entirely possible, probably not under Prime Minister Trudeau, but stranger things have happened. It's possible that the federal government would say, okay, Alberta, we're going to give you a better deal. And this happened in the 90s with Quebec, right? Their referendum was not successful. It was 49%, yet they still managed to fix their position within Confederation. They got a better deal. So that could happen in Alberta. I don't see it happening. I'm not going to hold my breath for it. So my goal is to see that referendum. Ask the people of Alberta the question. And this isn't out of the ordinary. In a democratic society, you should be able to ask people these kinds of questions and have them answer. If the Alberta Prosperity Project has done a good job as to educating Albertans as to the merits of independence, then more people are going to say yes than no on the referendum question. If they haven't done a good enough job or people really want to keep things the way they are, they're going to say no. So ultimately, it's not even up to the politicians or me or anybody else. It's up to the people of Alberta. I want to see the question asked.
What's next? What's happening now?
Well, I discovered 3 years ago when I bought this business that I really enjoy feeding people. I like giving people something that, it sustains them, it makes them happy, it's satisfying. I love that feeling. And now I have an opportunity with the platform I have and, the very humbling experience of being asked to speak at events all over Alberta. I have an opportunity to feed Albertans something different, and it's hope. That's what this is all about. It's a hope that as long as we stand together, because we're stronger together, and we stand up together and say enough is enough, we can sustain our hunger for freedom and prosperity. It's really that simple.
There's two different things. There's the APP, which you'd love to draw memberships towards, and then the Full Steam Ahead organization is there meant to help people who need a bit of a financial kick or some advice or something to help them deal with restrictions, right?
Now, wsfullsteamahead.org, that was started because we were watching what was going on around us, how the restrictions were affecting people, how the vaccine mandates were affecting people. They were losing their jobs. Even AHS workers that were at one time completely on the other side with me, they became affected by the mandates, and then they realized, hey, we got to do something. So that's why we formed that. And I'm not talking about just throwing money at people to pay their bills. I'm talking about doing things, hopefully within the courts, and paving the way for people to get remedy for the way they were treated over the last 2.5 years. those AHS workers that worked tirelessly to provide health services for us, and then they were told, beat it because you won't take this shot that you don't want. That's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. It should have never happened to anybody. And so that's what that's all about. Our mission statement starts with to advocate for those affected by the vaccine mandates. That's the number one part of our mission statement. And going further into it, one of our other parts of our mission statement is to effectively lobby, act as a lobby group to prevent this thing from happening ever again. And that's why, there is some synergy there. It's two different things. But at the end of the day, if I'm going to lobby to make sure this never happens again, and I have the opportunity to do something or be part of something that frees Alberta from the tyranny we're seeing from the federal government and allows us to construct a government that cannot and will not let this happen again because they prioritize individual rights and freedoms, well, you know what? That's the longest lasting thing that I can think to do to help the people that were affected in the last 2.5 years.
So Alberta Prosperity Project, can you again once say how many members you have now and what your goal is for the near future?
So the APP, I believe they're sitting around 8,300 members. And after tonight, that should be 84 or 8,500. Okay. And we're looking for, 100, 200, 500,000 members. Like if we can reach every person in Alberta and at least have them consider what we're advocating for and make a decision, I really don't see it being a problem to get 200 or 300,000 members, because this is something that would be to the benefit of every single person in this province.
We better direct people to their website if they're looking for that information, if they've been intrigued. What's their website?
Yeah, so that's www.albertaprosperityproject.com.
Okay.
And on that website, there's you can sign up as a member. Membership, I believe, is $20 or something like that. You'll have to forgive me because I'm not really on that end of it. But what that does, it's cheaper than a yearly Netflix or Disney Plus membership, and it has your voice counted as somebody who believes in rights and freedoms and wants this province to be prosperous. That's what that $20 buys you. It's a damn good investment. Full Steam Ahead is www.wsfullsteamahead.org. And you can also sign up for a membership there. There's forums on there where you can chat with like-minded people. You can share stories with each other. All of my events and things that I'm doing are posted on there, and a lot of information that people are looking for. So, you know what? They're both good things to be members of. And, it's great to be counted as a freedom-loving individual. And
you also have some challenges coming up in the near future in court. Can you talk about where that stands right now? And
that's all boring. That's just boring court stuff.
Okay, but that's something that so people know that you are right now still battling, and this is something that's going to continue probably for foreseeable future.
Yeah. So next week, I'm actually in court appearing on 22 charges of contravening the Public Health Act. And as far as I know, I believe the provincial government actually raised the maximum penalty for those. I think they're $500,000 each, so potentially $11 million in fines. It is interesting to point out that I have a lot of friends that I've made over the last 2.5 years who were in similar situations. And you know what happened shortly before they ended up in court? Well, everything was dropped. Thrown out of court. They never went to court. It was just said, no, we're not going to worry about it. Just go about your life. That hasn't happened with me yet. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't want it to happen because I want my day in court. I want to be able to stand there and face my accusers in court. And I want that judgment siding with me so that once that's done, now I can seek a remedy from them. We have to do something to hold the people that have done this to us accountable, and that's where it starts. Unfortunately, it starts in the courts because that's how it works, and it's very slow. But yeah, I am still in court.
Okay, well, thank you for all your time. I know you've got to go. Is there anything else you want to share with us before you take off and speak to a group of people in Wainwright?
Yeah, sure. So I'd like to address the people that really don't agree with what I've done and my position with these things over the last 2.5 years. I I'm well aware that there are people that are completely on the other side of this from me. And I respect the fact that they have different opinions. But the question I have for them is this. If you put yourself in your shoes 5 years ago and you looked at what was going on over the last 2.5 years, how would you feel about it? If you hadn't been bombarded with stories in the news that were later debunked or proven completely false, for instance, the videos of people falling over dead in China, we found out that was fake. How would you feel about this? How would you feel about elderly people being locked in their nursing homes and dying alone because the government said that's what had to happen? I want to live in a society where we're free to disagree with each other and we don't have a premier turning one part of the population against the other. I want to live in a society where our individual rights and freedoms are important and we're allowed to disagree without hate and division. And we don't have that right now. So I'm not going to apologize for my actions. I'm not going to say that I would do anything different, but I do want people to know that this isn't just for me. I'm not just fighting for me. I'm fighting to make sure that we actually have the choice to disagree in the future. That's it.
Thank you so much for your time, Chris. It's valuable and appreciate that. And I hope we can speak again maybe in a few weeks regarding your legal situation there. Okay.
Sure. Well, there might be some news in the next week or two because they scheduled a 3-day trial, and I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Okay. Thank you so much. All the best to you.
Thanks, Dwayne. You too.